The Rough Drafts podcast is sponsored by Unicorn.com, the world's premier esports betting site. Bet on your favorite games like CSGO, Dota 2, and League of Legends, and earn Unicoins through successful bets, or use Unicorn's exclusive Connect program, where you can earn Unicoins just by playing some of your favorite games. Use your earnings to enter Unicorn's raffles for exciting prizes like Logitech peripherals or CSGO skins. So join Chase and Walter and prove who really is the esports gambling expert. Unicorn.com. Log on today. Hello Internet! This is Walter Ceades Fedczuk welcoming you back to our coverage of our 2017 Spring Split European team-by-team preview. So far, we've covered Fnatic, we've covered G2 Esports, we've covered H2K Gaming, and I am joined by my good friend and co-host, Chase RedShirtKing Wassenar, to continue on with our fourth team. And Chase, I'm really excited for this team. How about you?
I'm excited to talk about them. I think that they're a very interesting team. There are some parallels I think we can draw to what Splice did in 2016 that I thought were very interesting when I went back and looked over some of the film. I've got concerns, but I've also got things that I'm excited about. And yeah, there's just a lot to talk about when it comes to a team that one could say does not quite fit in with the rest of the teams. Would you say that they are misfitted, one could say, compared to the way the rest of these organizations?
They are misfitted. I didn't know that was a word. But yes, we are in fact talking about the only challenger team in Europe to make it through the relegation process and into the League Championship Series. Misfits, the former Renegades organization challenger team, went off on their own, were purchased by Ben Spoont, who does things at Sci-Fi Network. And they are now their own organization, throughout the summer challenger process. And they beat Epsilon, a fellow challenger team, to make it in, and they beat Millennium in the Challenger Series summer playoffs, both of those 3-0s. And then when they got into promotion, they lost to a spunky Origin team at the time, 2-3 in that series, and then sort of rolled over Schalke 3-1. And they made a couple changes off of that Challenger Series roster. Alphari is still there in the top lane. The Wonderkind in the AD carry position, Hans Sama, is still there, along with his lane partner Ignar. But they made changes in the middle here, in the mid lane and in the jungle. One of which I'm excited for, one of which I'm tepid on. They've replaced Korean jungler Wisdom with Korean jungler KaKAO. And they've replaced Selfie with PowerOfEvil, the same mid laner who beat them in their first series of the promotional tournament. So Chase, when you look at this roster, what do you think? Is this a good team? Is this a good solid LCS team? Or are there some cracks here and there?
Well, I will say I appreciate PowerOfEvil subverting the norms by saying if you can beat them, join them anyway. So that worked out, I guess, from that interesting perspective. Honestly,
fair enough.
I mean, this is a team I felt like they needed to make some changes. Certainly when you're taking that Origin roster to 5 games, that's not a sign of optimism, I would say, as far as what your performance the next split is going to be. Obviously, Origin was particularly weak last split, so you have to look at that and say Misfits needs to do more if they're going to be a mid to top tier LCS team. And certainly these are two guys that have names that can get people excited. You know, if you're trying to build a brand in the LCS, how better to do that than the guy who had the Unicorns of Love brand built around him just over a year ago, and a guy in KaKAO who was a fan favorite, very beloved for anyone who was watching back at Season 4 when he was on that KT Arrows roster. So certainly they did a lot as far as helping ease their transition in the league as far as just getting a little bit more veteran leadership under their belt and getting some players that can really rally a fan base behind them. Whether that's going to translate into success on the Rift, I'm less certain, especially given where the meta is right now. I'm a little bit worried about how their strengths are going to match up against the rest of the teams in Europe. But certainly a very interesting roster and a collection of moves that are fun to kind of pick apart and see exactly how they fit into the overall plan.
Well, one of the non-moves of the off-season was maintaining their AD carry in Hans Sama. And if you watch the Challenger Series like I did, I'm a proponent of both regions' Challenger Series. Hans Sama, to me, is a special kind of player that I have not been as excited for in Europe since the days that Reckless was playing on Copenhagen Wolves or whatever. Copenhagen Wolves in the Challenger Series before he turned 17 and could join the NIP roster. So Chase, you also have him down as one of your most exciting players for this roster. What about him gets you going? What about him makes you so excited to finally see him debut on the Rift?
Well, I mean, how many hard-carrying AD carries do we have in Europe? You know, when you just look at it as a region, this has always been kind of something that's been pointed as a thing of weakness within Europe compared to North America, where AD carries seem to be growing like, apples on a tree. Here it was, you look at, Sven was obviously a huge boost to that particular position. Steelback really panned out well. Reckless, depending on where your opinion of him is, can or cannot be a world-class AD carry on his best days.
Yeah, I got you.
But at the end of the day, there are just so few players that really go out and try to dominate you. They want to kind of pick you apart, win in the lane and snowball, and that's been Hans Sama throughout the his career now as a challenger player. You look at the Lucian games that he has, and he's just absolutely dominant on the champion. He posted the 27.0 KDA in 3 games playing on it in the Challenger Series in the regular season, and then managed to win 3 more times with it in the summer playoffs. And, obviously the meta then shifted away from that, and it's gone more towards utility carries, and neither his Sivir nor his Ashe were quite as dominant when called upon. But the guy does know when the meta is built around the bot lane, he can play at a great Lucian. He can play a great Caitlyn. He's an amazing Ezreal. The guy is incredibly mechanically gifted, and he has no problem getting in people's faces and trying to make plays. And when a bot lane meta is around, that's going to be something they have that very few teams do, because there isn't any bot lane I'm looking at other than Sven and Mithy that's really built to deal with that level of aggression. There are plenty of guys that are fine with prolonged laning phases, but Hans will not wait for you to farm up and feel comfortable. That's not how they play that lane. Now, the problem is where the meta is right now. Mm-hmm. He's not able to have that same kind of impact, and we've seen him on utility AD carries, and he's still good. At his worst, he has been a very good AD carry. In the promotion series, his stats were, in my opinion, pretty much exactly what you'd want from a guy like that. 3.2 KDA, one of the biggest, highest kill participations on his team, 1 lane pretty consistently despite losing a series to Origin. These are things you want to see. I want to see him in a carry meta, because if we get that, we get a team that's going to be a ton of fun to watch, and he is always someone who can overpower the weaker teams in the league for sure.
So, I'm going to say something here that might get me crucified, that might be sacrilegious coming from my mouth.
Oh, I love sacrilege. Let's do it.
I think you know where I'm about to go with this. He reminds me of Forgiven.
Okay, yeah. I see what you're saying.
His laning play style is that he plays to win lane. Double Lift too. I think Double Lift and Forgiven do have similar play styles like that. However, they do it in slightly different ways. But that is that type of carry, that type of AD player that Hans Sama really is. He really wants to really control the laning phase. He wants to make you fight for every CS. He wants to set up the lane in ways that he can harass you while he's also farming, very much like Forgiven and some of the upper tier echelon AD carries in the world. I'm thinking Deft. I don't think Hans Sama is anywhere near Deft. That's not what I'm saying, but that type of mindset, that type of play pattern, I think is very similar. And he has an AD carry that fits that to a support that fits that to a T in Ignar. Watching the two of them play, watching the two of them manipulate lanes, understanding that, having this one, bush control or having the ward in the next bush and setting up plays. Ignar works very, very well with Hans Sama and allows him to be super successful. But another thing that led to that success was a focus from their former jungler in Wisdom. He really did like to focus that bot lane, understanding where the carry potential was, especially early on in the season. And then as the meta shifted, he shifted away too. Also thinking of Llama Bear, the other jungler that they had. Again, very bot lane focused. And then as the meta shifted, they then started to shift into the top lane to Alphari and really focus on him. KaKAO. I love me some KaKAO. KaKAO is awesome. I'm glad that he's not in the dregs of the LSPL and we get to watch him again, because I was one of those fanboys that just liked watching him play. And, being a friend of Shorter Ace and a former, manager coach of Shorter Ace, that was his favorite player. So you constantly were hearing, oh, KaKAO did this. Oh, KaKAO used to do this. Oh, using KaKAO's rune pages. Like, I love the guy. When they won Summer, that was amazing. It was wonderful.
Oh, one of the best series of all time.
KaKAO's the greatest emote of all time, and I'm kind of disappointed it sort of disappeared. But, big but, he's not been very good the last 2 years.
No.
Has he, Chase?
There are a lot of people that are like, man, I miss watching KaKAO. I hear that opinion all the time. You're far from the only one. And my only response has been, be careful what you wish for, because you just might get it. And we're going to get KaKAO in the LCS, and I hope people are excited about that, because when you see him play, you won't be. The stats from the LSPL are abysmal. First of all, you would imagine a player of KaKAO's ability, from what we saw in 2014, and even during his time in Invictus, he wasn't great in 2015 with Invictus. That Skarner game will forever haunt my memories as someone who was rooting for that team in that tournament. But, he goes to the LSPL, and you would imagine, like, oh, this is when he starts hard carrying. And in the spring, he went 10-18. They had to bench him in their relegation series. Not relegation as in promoting to the LPL. No, relegation is in not going to be an LSPL team anymore. Not even good enough for the Challenger League, which, by the way, they lost that series, then had to buy back in. He goes back at it again, slightly better this time around. He has some good Olaf games, a couple good Hecarim games as well. So certainly his stats individually were better. Had something like a 4.73 KDA, but again, as an LSPL jungler, and they still went to relegation again. They still had to fight their way back for a job because they couldn't figure out how to be good enough to even stay in the Chinese Challenger League. And I don't know about you, but when it comes to a jungler, a guy who we've talked about on this podcast before has so much of an ability to determine the pace of a game, what players are set up to take advantage of these opportunities. He had more of an opportunity than any other player on his team to make an impact, and he just couldn't do it. And that is so incredibly worrying to me going forward. There's nothing that I have looked at other than him sometimes playing against really bad teams and playing junglers whose job is just to gank. Yeah, on that, he's looked okay. He's had some good games on those kinds of champions in that particular situation. But against good LSPL teams know how to play against him. They've figured out his pathing is incredibly predictable. People have been able to just pin down where he's going to be, and good teams have taken advantage of that. And when Chinese challenger teams are taking advantage of it, I have to believe that European LCS teams have enough film to take advantage of it. And when he has to play anything that provides utility, you talk about, well, why did Misfits succeed? Well, they had a jungler who understood that his goal was not to be the star player, but to make sure that Hansama and Alphari and Selfie were set up to make the plays that they needed to make. And that's simply not the case with how KaKAO has been playing. KaKAO tends to hunt for his own kills. He does his best when he is ganking aggressively and trying to, recreate that 2014 magic. And, it just leaves me with this feeling of, I don't think he does well in this particular meta, but even if the meta changes, I don't think he's a good fit for this team. And even if he somehow found a way to strategically match what they're looking for, which seems like it would require a very big attitude readjustment from him, then we still have the problem of the guy was barely doing well enough to beat out these challenger Chinese junglers. Now he's playing against the best that Europe has to offer. There's just so many red flags. I cannot... The store is literally out of red flags to sell when it comes to KaKAO. I don't... It's impossible for me to get excited about the guy when so many things have gone wrong in the last calendar year.
See, I get excited just because of the name, just because of the historical impact, and this is the same type of feeling that gets Peke elected to an All-Star game.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not saying it's good. That. I'm not saying it's right. Obviously, Misfits saw something in the play style. Maybe he was sloughing off in China. Was partying too much with Imp. Was spending all his money on $1,000 designer shirts. I don't know. I can't speculate as any of that. But Misfits must have seen something. And that is why, while I am concerned, there hasn't been anything the past year in his competitive match history that makes me go, yeah, definitely, I want this guy on my team. There is sort of a dearth of jungling talent or lack of consistency in the jungling talent behind the top two in Jankos and Trick. And even they, at times during last year, did have some consistency problems. I'm thinking of Trick at the World Championship. I'm thinking of Jankos prior to the World Championship. So there is a chance that, if you're looking at junglers and you're going, okay, well, I need my jungler to be good 75% of the time, there's a chance that, okay, sure, KaKAO hits that bar 75% of the time. Like I said, there's nothing...
optimistic.
That's optimistic. There's nothing... Statistically, there's nothing in his match history and his competitive history in the past year when he's been playing. I'd even go back 2 years. I'd say even if his time on IG was sort of hit or miss. We all remember the Skarnar games in the 2015 World Championship kind of going...
And even before that, let's face it, it's not like that Invictus team was some powerhouse. They snuck in because they did well in regionals because the Juggernaut patch was weird, and they adjusted better than some other teams to it.
Yeah.
Like that. This was not an Invictus team where you're like, oh man, KaKAO had such a great split leading that team to victory. He didn't play particularly well. And look, I don't blame Misfits for signing him. You're a new organization in the European League. What's the best way to get people talking about your team outside of signing a high-profile Korean player that fans have missed watching? Like, he's going to get all of the hype. The OGN KaKAO signs will be throughout the, the stadium in Berlin. They're going to get a huge pop every time they introduce him. And it's going to, if he does well, the highlight videos on Reddit will be very successful. It's a great business move. I don't think it's a great roster move. That's where I land down on it.
Well, and that's totally justifiable. I don't think that's the worst roster move Misfits has necessarily made. I've been very public in my dislike for this other roster move, which, hey, they only had 2 changes, and we said both of them earlier, so PowerOfEvil.
Yes.
PowerOfEvil. Now, prior to recording this, we both were reminded of ourselves that, Misfits lost to Orien in their first round of the promotion series and went back, and it looked like, PowerOfEvil had some good games. He had some pretty good games in that series. He had a couple good Cassiopeia games. He had a good Syndra game. Right? Those are his champions. Right in his wheelhouse. Perfect. Yeah. Those long-range harassy kind of poke champions. The Syndras, the Zeros, the Varuses, whatever. Mm-hmm. That's not where the meta sits now. It's very staggered. If they're like, Syndra's still really good, Cassiopeia is pretty good, but then there's all these assassins. You got your LeBlancs, you've got your Katarinas that are totally tearing apart the ladder, and I don't actually think we'll see professional play. But I'm just reminded of just an awful summer split for him. And the fact that in the spring playoffs where, Origin took second to G2, they had to bring in Peke multiple times because they couldn't trust PowerOfEvil in clutch, potentially split-ending series games. So you have him down as what determines the season here. And I agree with you here. I think more so than KaKAO being good, which PowerOfEvil shows up determines which way that this goes. So what PowerOfEvil needs to show up for Misfits to actually have a rather successful season?
Well, if they're going to be successful, I mean, certainly you pointed to some meta things, and poke long range kind of champions have been Something he's done well with is Varus has been historically very, very good as well. The guy is, to me, one of the great examples of a potential change of scenery guy. That Origin team was a disaster last split. I mean, all the bad publicity that was coming out, XPeke's mom mismanaging things, a lack of shot calling. I mean, a lot of people point out the fact that PowerOfEvil was getting subbed out for XPeke, not because he was playing particularly poorly, because his stat lines during the games in which he was brought out were not bad. The problem was that there was no shot caller, and PowerOfEvil is not a shot caller. A lot of it's going to fall down on whether Ignar is a shot caller and can consistently remain a shot caller, and whether they're going to be able to execute on those plays with KaKAO. And again, how that fits in is going to be huge. But regardless of how it's going to work out, PowerOfEvil is going to be left to be the same kind of guy that he was in 2015, which is they have this entire team where they have a top laner in Alphari who's solid and consistent, but is probably not going to be carrying that many games for you. You've got a bot lane that's getting a lot of the attention. Back then it was because Hylissang was such a great aggressive support. He would just set up those kind of plays. And the mid lane just had to do its own thing. And in those situations, PowerOfEvil tended to do very well. He didn't do very well on Assassins, but he did do pretty well on the kind of control mages that you would want to see. And it felt like he was being held back by his team. And I don't think I'd say anything different about what happened in Origin. And when he played against a team in Misfits that was as good as you could hope for to play in that particular tournament, the guy had an 83.7% kill participation. The guy was the center of basically everything that happened for that team outside of Hybrid. He's played well. Is it good enough? Is what PowerOfEvil brings on a week-to-week basis good enough to be a primary carry on a team, to be the guy that they're depending on week in and week out, to be that consistency when KaKAO's still getting used to the system and Hans Sama, maybe the meta isn't right, or God forbid they fell behind in the bot lane once. Can PowerOfEvil step up? That's what we have yet to see. And there's evidence that says that he underperformed last split, and for a lot of reasons that we could understand. He underperformed. But did he underperform because he dropped off mechanically? Did he underperform because there was no shot calling involved? Did he underperform because there was a terrible practice environment? Did he underperform? I mean, there's so many things that went wrong. And the team never really set him up to succeed. It's not like Amazing was ever ganking for the guy. Amazing left him hung out to dry more often than not. So I think there's a chance. I think that if you allow KaKAO to set up PowerOfEvil, and again, this means KaKAO has to move into a more supplementary role, which is not how he likes to play. But if you can pull that off, and the bot lane is independent enough, or draws enough attention away that PowerOfEvil can start to roam and take advantage of the champions that he does like to play, he could have a resurgent year. I think he can definitely make his way back into the upper tier of mid laners. The problem is that all the other mid laners he's playing against this split seem to have done so way more consistently, more recently than him. And it's going to require a leap forward that I don't see any evidence is coming along the way. When we've seen a player for 4 splits now, you pretty much know who he is. And I don't see his champion pool drastically changing, and that will continue to be a problem. And I don't see him suddenly turning into this hard carry style player.
Absolutely
which
not.
Is, yeah.
Absolutely not.
And so when both of those things are out, what's left is being a mid-tier mid laner enough, and can he be that every week? We're gonna have to find out. But it's certainly, I think there's potential for things to be better than they were, but they're never going to be as good as people who saw PowerOfEvil in 2015 thought they were going to be. I think that's clear by this point.
Potentially, what is your prediction for this team?
I think they're on the outside looking in when the playoffs roll around. I don't think they're there yet. I think that this is a team, when you're struggling to beat Origin in 5 games, despite the fact that it's Hans Sama versus XPeke in the AD carry position, I have huge concerns. I don't think Alphari is good enough to carry against most of the top laners he's going to be going up against.
I'm sorry. You're.
I take six. Okay, let's real quick.
Let's play the name game. Let's play the name game. Ceades.
I take Ceades over.
Expect.
I take Alphari.
Flaxish.
I take Alphari.
Odoamne.
Odoamne.
Sartorius.
Probably Alphari, but I think it's closer than people think.
Wonder.
Wonder every time. Kavashard every time. Fedczuk every time. He's not going to be a top-tier top laner. That's not. It's not, to me, particularly close.
I think he's going to hold his own among the top laners more than you think.
Yeah, it'll be fine, but he's not what's going to win them the game, and what will be what wins them the game. And I don't see the win condition right now. The bot lane alone doesn't do it. It wasn't enough back when they were playing against Origin, when Origin had a terrible bot lane. So if the bot lane alone can't do it, what will? I don't have enough faith in those other three guys that are going to be the core of your solo lanes. I don't see them pulling it off. I don't think KaKAO's that guy. I don't think PowerOfEvil is going to make the leap, even though I think it's in play. And I don't think Alphari is good enough. I'll put it that way. So I think they're a 7 or an 8 seed. I think they're safe from relegation, but I don't think they're a playoff team yet. I think they need more time.
I agree that they're going to struggle early on, but this is Europe. There's going to be a fight among probably 4 or 5 teams for 3 spots in the playoffs, and I think that Misfits is one of those 3 teams that do end up getting in there, because we don't know how meta shifts are going to go, but Ignar and Hansama are just an incredible bot lane. Yeah. And while I don't think that like a best of 5 series necessarily plays to their strengths right now, I do think that, in the best of 3 there are chances where Hansama can carry multiple games. I am much higher on Alphari than you are. I agree that like when you go number by number, the only reason you're putting Ceades on top of him is because historically Ceades has such an incredible variance of who can show up. But there's a chance that the 2 times they play him, Ceades just goes total mental Ceades, and Alphari has a good time. I think talent-wise, he matches where Wonder was in the spring split for Sprice, and he was their best player at that time. He was the best player on that team.
I just think top laners in general have gotten better in Europe. I think that Wonder is much better than he was back then.
Wonder is, I would agree.
Fedczuk, Odoamne. Like, I just think it takes
Cabochard has
proven...
proven...
rookies in general, I think we underestimate how long it takes for them to heat up. And again, is KaKAO going to be the guy that puts Alphari in a place to succeed? Is PowerOfEvil going to be drawing enough attention away that Alphari is going to be put as that guy? That's where I just disagree with you. But
we'll 8 weeks, when we're at week 6, I want to come back to this discussion because I think you're criminally underrating Alphari. Criminally underrating him.
I don't think he's bad. I just don't think he's a hard carry player. That's where I will disagree.
I'm not saying he's a hard carry player.
Go talk. Look, let me know.
It's not 6 weeks from now. It's not 8 weeks from now. So
we'll see. I'm at RedShirtKing. Let me know if you think I'm too harsh on Alphari, or whether you think that KaKAO is secretly just biding his time, pretending to be bad in the LSPL for a whole year.
Don't invite that hatred onto yourself.
Please come at me. I love it. It only makes me stronger. But genuinely, I love talking to you guys. Let me know what you guys think of this episode. Please, by all means. I think Misfits is an interesting team, and it's nice to see that people are coming down on both sides of it. So
I agree. Misfits is 100% a very interesting team. I think that there are definitely some pieces here that are going to determine which way their season goes and where they end up. And that's been Misfits. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us, for listening. If you've enjoyed the podcast, you guys can follow us on Twitter at Rough Drafts Pod. You can follow myself at Ceades_LOL and tell me why I'm correct, that Alphari is going to be the next great thing in Europe. But that is our 4th European team so far. As we said at the beginning, we've done Fnatic, we've done H2K, we've done G2, now we've done Misfits. We've done 4 teams over in North America as well. You can go ahead and just hit next to get that very next one. We did Team Envious today, a team that I'm not envious of in any regard. But then come back tomorrow, where we're going to hit you up with another North American team and another European team that, if you're from Rochester like myself, you definitely have to root for these guys. A hometown organization from Rochester that's playing in Berlin. Goodbye, Internet. Hey there, Ceades here. Thanks for checking out the podcast. And if you enjoyed today's episode, consider supporting us at www.patreon.com/roughdraftspod. For just $1 a month, you can join your fellow listeners in our patron-only Discord channel and help keep the content coming, or join our VIP club, where $1 a show or $8 a month gets you first priority on all patron content like our patron-only Q&As. And check us out on all of our social media, Twitter @RoughDraftsPod, Facebook.com/RoughDraftsPod, SoundCloud.com/esportsroughdrafts, as well as on iTunes and YouTube by just searching for the Rough Drafts Podcast. Thanks for listening, and goodbye, Internet.